Hello students. So welcome to the second part of this mock paper. Now students, if you look at the task 1 part B, the format is prepare a report, okay, to board of directors. So you need to be very much careful about the format as well. You may not get sufficient marks for this, but it's always better to make sure that your formats are proper. Evaluate financial benefits and drawbacks of each investment proposal. So they want you to guide with the financial benefits and the drawbacks. And the verb what they use is evaluate students. So it's a higher level verb. That means you need to have an evidence-based writing. You have to use the data given by the exhibit more than the knowledge, because evaluate, assess, and analyze, these three verbs are more towards case and the industry specific. Now, the next one, if I'm not mistaken, is they're giving 10 marks. So before I start working on the answer, I always better to make sure to have an answer plan so that students, I don't make any issues when I'm writing the answer. Now, if you observe, my first point of focus will be the marks. The marks given for this question is 10 marks in total, and I should effectively take 18 minutes. As I told you, I'm not counting, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not counting the 15 minutes extra time. I'm just taking for 3 hours only. So 1.8 minutes for a mark. So effectively 18 minutes in total. Now, students, the verb I have to be very, very careful, that is evaluate, because they are asking financial benefits. So one is financial benefits and drawbacks. Financial benefits and what students? Drawbacks of each performance of each investment proposal. Of each investment what students? Proposal. Just keep that in mind. Now, students, the next thing that you have to be very much careful is the part B. Now, again, you see the part B verb is assess, and it's all in the part of the report. The non-financial considerations for each investment proposal. So, students, non-financial consideration. So, I'll write down here non-financial consideration for each proposal. For each proposal, understand that very, very well. Again, they are effectively giving you how many marks, students? 10 marks is given. And the last one, which is very, very important, that is recommend. Look at the verb they are using, recommend with justification. That means you cannot say yes or no. You need to justify the situation. The any of any investment needs to be executed. Now, if they use the term if any, sometimes you can say no for both. You can say no for both in case if they mention any. So I'll write down here no for both in that case. So remember that, students. So now I have to make sure my mind is very much clear, and the skills they are giving is skeptical skills, and that is 4 marks here. Now students, one thing, when I read the question task requirement, I have to again ask my question. So investment proposal. So there is a proposal exhibit. And then for that exhibit, I have to be aware about the non-financial consideration. And then we have to check whether that is suited or not suited for the situation. So I believe everyone is very much clear with that point of view at the moment. Now, students, what I have to effectively go towards is the exhibit number 2. Now, if you see in your exams, you may not get such a long exhibit, but purposely I created this so that you may get used to the difficult situation before you go to the examination. Now, let's assume how we have to structure this. Because if you see here, one is financial benefit and drawbacks. Okay, so one thing, this gives you the overview. And if you see here, you have the financial data. So you have to plan very well, because if you see non-financial consideration is also considered. So effectively 10 marks. So if I'm not mistaken, what I can effectively do, just to make sure your thinking is very clear, so I can segregate my points into 2. Now, if you observe here, we have 2 investment proposal. So for that, we have to understand the financial benefits, if I'm not mistaken. And then students, we can effectively go to the drawback. So what I have to observe is that planning is essential. And here they are again asking 10 marks once again, evaluate that assessment is there. Again, you see students, there are effectively two proposals. We have to consider the non-financial considerations. So it's a wonderful question to be considered at the moment. So students, let's start going through this step by step so that you will be able to understand the applications of this very, very well. So, considering the challenges associated with cloud solutions industry, the management is considering to diversify to other segments, and there are two potential investment portfolio. Now, students, if you observe in the pre-seen material, they already mentioned that we are at a flux. So, there is a situation of two investment proposals to be considered. Now, these are the information given. One is the online game development platform and OTT platform for short films only. So, what I will do is, students, I will segregate this in my answer plan. One is online game development platform. Online game development platform. And the other one is, students, OTT platform. OTT platform for what, students? Short films. OTT platform for short films. And what I can effectively do is I can just copy and paste this, because we have to plan the answer well in order to score properly in the examination. And students, definitely one question will come in financial analysis, and it's not hard like you are thinking. It's the most easiest one if you understand the question task properly. Now, students, if you observe in this case, the overview, so they are saying the game development platform will be on cloud. Understand it very well, where any user can create any games they like and they can sell it in the platform. So they can create their own game and they can sell it in the platform. This will generally ensure there are some more users, advertisement revenue may rise, and also we will be able to get access to data of the users prior permission as well, with permission. Okay, so students, if you observe now, one financial or non-financial perspective in this case is, students, if I'm not mistaken, advertisement revenue. Now, students, they are mentioning we will get advertisement revenue. The question is, what type of advertisement? What type of advertisement? Because, students, there can be advertisements which are like 18 plus, or something irrelevant or offensive. Correct, no, students? If I'm not mistaken, irrelevant, or there can be situation of offensive type of advertisements. So in that case, students, you have to make sure your answers are properly connected in order to score well in the examination. Get that point of view very, very well. So this is one non-financial consideration, if I'm not mistaken. And I have to be very much specific in that thinking also. Now, the next thing, students, if I'm not mistaken, now this game development platform. So one thing is technical feasibility. Now, I'm not using the SFA framework, but I'm just making sure that whether there is a technical feasibility for this, because this is a skeptical question that we have to ask. In case if we are outsourcing, do we have the reliability on the people where we are outsourcing this? So this is one factor that we have to keep in mind. So I believe this is the way that you have to think, students. So understand it very well. I'm not copy pasting the exhibit. I am making sure the points in the exhibits are correct or not correct, if I'm not mistaken. And then, students, patent issues. Example, who owns the game? Who owns the game? Now, students, example, they're saying we get advertisement revenue. But later, what about the code of that game? Can someone take that code? That is one thing to be considered, students. Now, the next thing, if I'm not mistaken, I'll just check the OTT platform. Short films are currently underrated. Therefore, we are planning to make sure there is an OTT platform for short films which may enable users to pay a monthly annual subscription. This can generally have a better revenue generation since the short film can be watched without any advertisement. So students, again, they are saying short films without advertisement, but the issue is what about the script quality? because students, sometimes short films may not have a very good script quality, if I'm not mistaken. What about the directors and actors? Because we don't know whether stars are acting or very popular directors are acting there. So that is one more factor to be considered, if I'm not mistaken. And then students, what about the revenue share to the revenue share for the content creators? Because that is very, very important, no students. We have to pay them a share. It is not free. So in that case, we have to ask these questions which are not addressed in this. Now, students, if you observe initial investment of the project, the game development platform, the initial investment is only $6 million. So students, just assume this is the local currency, $6 million. This is the initial investment. Now, students, if I'm not mistaken, one of the financial drawback I can say, investment breakdown is not provided. Investment breakdown, because breakdown is not provided. They are asking 6 million is not provided on what we are going to do. What are the wages? What are the capital investments? That is not mentioned. What are the other cost, maintenance? Everything needs to have an understanding. For OTT platform, we need to have an initial investment of 20 million. Once again, students, 20 million is a very big amount. So I have to again ask investment breakdown, because we need to understand investment breakdown. What is happening to that 20 million, students? That is very, very, very important. And then students, if you observe the project commencement date, we have found some platform developers and programmers, and they have suggested that the company can start the development once the funds are ready. Okay, so they are saying initially itself they can start. Now that looks fine, but if I am very skeptical, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm very skeptical, now the issue is, whether do we have an assurance assurance of the developers, because we need to get a second opinions and programmers. Correct, no students, if I'm not mistaken. And how did we select them? How did we select them? That is a very much a question. We select them based on what? Their trading history, nothing is mentioned. So that is a question of doubt I have to ask. We have a platform developer who can create the website and apps which can be used in any device. Also, we are in negotiation with short film directors, producers to understand the service needed. So once again, students, once again, the issue is assurance of this developers, that is not mentioned, and this is a common point. And also directors and producers, if I'm not mistaken, directors and producers. Now again the question arises here is, students, the script quality makes very, very important, script quality. And then students, if I'm not mistaken, there may be regulatory issues, right? Censor board. So can I say here censor board may come into the picture, regulatory issues. Project duration, completion of the project within 6 months time. So they say, what is the assurance for 6 months? Once again, I have to ask, assurance for 6 months. 6 months. Do they have any past track records? Because that is very, very important question we have to always ask for. The completion of the project may take 14 months since we have assessed the contents of short films. So I just want to be clear, 14 months. Why? 14 months, why? And I have to ask, do they have any time breakdown structure? Because they have to give a time breakdown structure in order to make sure the quality of the contents are very much stronger and clearer. So I believe, students, this is very practical for you all at the moment. And if you observe, students, based on this, you are able to understand how to create your thinking aspect. And students, please make sure not to follow my answers. Your thinking may be far better. In case if you have better thinking, please put it into the chat box, comment box below. I will be able to understand what you are thinking. So students, I believe this is very clear for you all. Now students, if you observe in this case, now cloud development platform and OTT platform. Now students, if you observe one financial drawback commonly between both, if I'm not mistaken, The time period is 7 years. The time period is 7 years. And students, without any updates, because students, these are technological industry, no students. So now you see, you invest 6 million, and do you think that 6 million can survive for the update? So again, this is one factor, and I am just making sure that I plan my answer properly before I write my answer as well. Now, students, if you observe, only NPV is provided. Correct, no students? Only NPV is provided. So one of the advantage I can say here is financial. Now, these are the financial drawbacks, but one of the advantage I can say is higher NPV. Higher NPV. This is the higher NPV, and still one financial advantage is a positive NPV, but actually I have to do a detailed discussion. NPV is not sufficient, but in the financial point of view, that is fine. And then students, if I'm not mistaken, the discount rates, if you see, they're giving 9% and 12%. So the rationale behind discount rate is not provided. So I'll write down here, rationale behind the discount rate, rationale behind the discount rate. Why they have chosen this? That is the question that I have to ask. And if you compare both and see, I feel that the OTT platform may look high risk. So I'll write down here, OTT may have a higher risk, because students, scripts are there, no students, movie scripts. So higher risk, therefore, in that case, the risk is generally high. The risk is generally, what students, generally higher. That is one factor I can say with regards to the discounting rate. Now, students, if you observe, in the first year, you are making a 1 million loss. Correct, no students? So I'll just write down here, 1 million loss in year 1. Reason. We have to understand what is the reason behind that. And then students, 0.2, 0.6, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, effectively, you see here, students, if you observe, the total cash flow, if you effectively consider in practical terms, students, if I'm not mistaken, I'll just write down one drawback in payback period is 7th year. Students, how did I calculate it? Now, in this paper, you have to be shrewd. Now, 1 minus 1. Do you see here? There is a 1 here, students. I believe you can see 1 and 1 is getting cancelled. Then, students, if you see 2, that means it will be 4. And then 3. So, 2 minus 4 minus 3 is 1. And here you have 0.8. So, still 0.2 balance will be there. So, in that case, it will take at least the 7th year, the 6th year or the 7th year, in between that, to get this money collected. So payback is very late, if I'm not mistaken, for your understanding. That is one thing. And then students, if I think about the positive, I can say lower investment, because students, we have a very low investment in this case. So that is one factor to be considered as well. And then students, coming here for your understanding. Now, another thing is, students, if you observe, IRR is low. IRR is low because, students, you see how I calculated it. 9% is giving 0.6.98. So 10% may sometimes give you a minus. 11% may give you a minus. So IRR rate is very low in this particular situation. So the advantages of this project is positive NPV, and also it is giving a lower investment needed fund. But coming to the OTT platform, students, if you observe, students, higher NPV, but here, students, can I write down one disadvantage is higher investment fund. That's a bigger challenge, if I'm not mistaken. And then, students, just to keep yourself confident and sharp enough to understand how these things effectively work. Now, that is one thing to keep in mind. The next thing, students, just to make your life even better and clearer to understand, if you see year 1, it is 0, nothing. You would earn nothing. So I'll write down here, year 1, no returns. But in the previous one, there was a negative, but here no returns. The question is it real? Is it real? Because students, can you have zero? Technically, it needs to be minus because you need to pay employees' salaries, students' salaries, wages must be paid. Correct, no students. So I'll write down here fixed cost is there, no students. Whatever said and done. So that is not mentioned here. And then students, you see, it will look at here 20. So let's see the payback. So if you consider 20, if you take 14, so it will be 16. And then 5 gone means it will be 11. Then students, it will be 5. I think you will be able to collect the money within the 4th year. That means the 5th year. So I'll write down here one thing. Payback in is in 4th, or I can say 5th year. Is in the 5th year. That means 4 years and 5 years in between that. And then students, IRR is little higher because you see at 12% itself, it's 2.67 is, I'll write down here, better IRR because the margin of safety is far better in this particular situation, if I am not mistaken. And also students, after the payback, you see one thing, the growth is linear. Now, if the payback is at here, 7, 8, 9, so the subscribers all are going up. That is one more factor to be considered. And here also I can say one advantage is the growth is higher. So I'll write down here two things. So I'll write down here growth is linear. Growth is linear. That's a skeptical question, how it is linear. Can't there be any disruptors? Can't there be any competitors in the market? So growth is linear, one financial advantage. So students, I believe everyone has got this very, very clearly. And observe the technique I was using. I did not use any technique from my knowledge. I was just going with the practical application, and it was not so complicated, students. It's very, very simple and easier as well. Now, students, now the next thing in this case is non-financial consideration, competitors' actions. Competitors' actions. That is one thing, students, you have to keep in mind. So I'll write down that also, students. Competitors' actions. Competitors' actions will be one more factor to keep in mind. That is very, very important. And then students, cyber risk, because if you say gaming platform has more cyber risk, if I'm not mistaken. And students, marketing and promotion, because that is very, 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 very important. So can I write down here marketing and promotions also? And then students, again, what if a short film, doesn't do well. So that will be another challenge also for our organization. So students, did you observe the entire answer is structured? This is just 10 marks question, students. Even if you calculate and see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 18 is there. More than enough, students. You can manage it properly. And here also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So again 15 points are there. Now let's think about the recommendations, students. If you observe, financially wise, I think OTT platform is highly recommended. But the challenge is it has high non-financial risk because scripts are different and we are not in this industry. We don't have any directors in that. But gaming sector, whatever said and done, students, we have some idea about how cloud computing works. Sometimes we would have had some knowledge about that. So we have some technical expertise also. So that will be better. And the reason is the investment fund is lower. So even if that was a loss also, there won't be any issues because our institutional investors are very much risk averse. Keep that in mind. And the final thing, students, if you see in my point of view, my recommendation for this particular situation will be not to proceed in either of this. Because the reason is we have existing SME customers. They are our main people at the moment. So the biggest justice what we can do for them is we can give them better service offering so that they will be performing well in the upcoming years. I believe that is very clear for the students at the moment. So the first thing what I want to do here is I'll just start working on the answer so that it will be very, very easy for you all on how to structure. It's not so complicated. So I'll write down here report, and I'll write down here 2, and I'll mention here board of what students? Directors. We have to write it down, board of directors. NcTech, keep that in mind. From management consultant. From whom students? Management consultant. And then students, I'll write down here the date, and I'll just mention, they will give it in the examination date, but I'm just using today's date, 27th November 27th November 2023. And then students, I'll write down here subject, and I'll just mention here as evaluation of cloud gaming platform and OTT platform projects OTT platform projects. So just get this understanding very practical here. So I believe everyone is very clear with this point of view at the moment. So just to be transparent, I'll just write down here introduction. And as I told you students, you can go through that debrief, which is there, the mind of the examiner of COJET. The examiner wants the student to ensure that the structure is there, but he will not be very much interested in giving so much marks only for the introduction, everything. So I'll write down here the report intends to evaluate the financial benefits and drawbacks, of each of the project, and assess the non-financial consideration of each project, and recommend the suitable course of action. With justification. Now students, what I can effectively guide you all in this case is, make sure students your verbs are mentioned. That means it will give you some lot of marks, so that examiner will be very clear that the student is writing the answer to what I have asked. And then students, if I'm going to write down here, firstly I'm going to write down here financial benefits. And then students, I have two options, but my suggestion is, just to be precise, let's go with one by one. And financial benefits of a cloud game development platform. So I will write it down like this, so that it will be very clear for you all. Students, the structurization, what you can follow. Example, evaluate means, students, you have to do a detailed discussion, but considering the time frame you have, you can go with the state apply conclusion if needed, and you will get 1 mark because you have so many points here. So now if you observe the financial benefit, now you see here, the financial benefit, positive NPV, lower investment and growth is linear. So I will write down here the financial benefits on technical base is that the project is providing a positive NPV, Now students, this is not sufficient. You will not get marks, because you have to give some rationale behind that. Because for NcTech, they may not lose investment fund where the institutional investors will be keen since the funds may be generated. Look at the term I am using, may be generated internally. What students? Internally. Keep that in mind for your answer planning. That is very, 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 very important. And then students, just to make sure, the next point of view is the lower investment. So I'll write down here, the next thing is further $6 million, or I'll write down here $6 million investment is lower compared to the investment in the OTT platform. Therefore, in case if there is a loss, still the impact is less for the NcTech management, and the shareholders may not face any dividend cuts as well. So that is one more point of view, students. Now, generally, if you write 6 million is lower, you will not get marks. Just make sure you strike a balance properly in this case. And then, students, the growth is linear. So I'll write down here the growth of this project is linear. Therefore, it looks a better investment for 6 million finance. So students, that is one thing. But now I'm going to ask some question. However, the following factors needs to be provided. Skepticism needs to be provided. Investment fund breakdown. What are they doing with that? Also how the revenue or how the cash flow was estimated. Was it purely based on advertisement revenue or something or any subscription or any partnering with the game developers. Now, students, another factor just to keep that in your mind is it's not so complicated. It's very simple and very easy. I'll write down here. Further, another factor to be considered is very simple. To be considered can be there are situations where the company will be able to have a linear growth, but the supporting evidences are less. So keep that in mind, students. Therefore, how linear growth can be achieved needs to be clarified. Students, I believe this is clear for you all at the moment. So just make sure that point of view is very practical. Now, since that is also done, students, now the next thing what I can do is I can go for the financial benefits of the short film, so OTT platform. So let's go to that. So I'll write down here financial benefits of OTT platform. So students, now my report structure becomes very easier for the examiner to mark. It's not so complicated. It is very practical and easier. So you see here, students, the financial factor is higher NPV, very higher NPV. And students, but the NPV may be higher, but the ROI is the question of doubt. Because 6 million, you are getting 0.69, and I think in that case, this is somewhere around 10% ROI. Correct, no, students, if I'm not mistaken. And 20 are getting again 20.1. So again, it's somewhere around 11%. So the ROI looks more similar in both cases. The percentage return, that is in simple language, if you see here, students, 0.698, that is the return for the investment of 6. And 0.657, that is the return for the investment of 20. And if you multiply this by 100, you may effectively understand how this function works. So I believe this is giving a better clarity at the moment. So let's work out this very practically so that it won't be any issues for you all. The OTT platform for short films has a higher NPV, higher what students? NPV compared with cloud games. Therefore, in that case, there are chances the yield can be higher, considering the future potentials, that is one factor to be considered. Now students, if you observe the skeptical question, what we have to ask here is, however, the ROI is similar for both investment, so I'll just write it down in this case. Now students, the next one, which is very important factor to consider, is payback is faster. So I'll write down here, the next thing is the payback period. The payback period is generally in the fifth year. The payback period is generally in the fifth year, which is a better return on investment recovery, since it is far better than getting the yield on the seventh year. Now here I'm doing a comparing and contrast for cloud games. Now here I got little bit stuck because I have done an explanation on compare and contrast, but don't worry students. So that is one factor to be considered. And also this project is having a linear growth in the future. So that means it's growing in a positive direction. Keep that in mind for your understanding. Now students, the next thing I can also say further, since the cost of capital is at 12%, and the NPV looks higher, there are chances that the business will be able to have a better IRR, since the risk is fine with the return they produce or they generate. So that is one more thing, the IRR factor. Just make sure that is properly connected in this case. Now students, if you observe, this gives you a better understanding at the moment. And I think this is a little bit advanced question because 10 marks is a very high level marks. But I think just to make the life simple and easier. Now, the next thing, students, just to make sure, I just write down the other one is financial drawback, because you have to structure this answer properly. So I'll write down here financial drawbacks of, if I'm not mistaken, cloud gaming platform. What students? Platform. Financial drawbacks of cloud gaming platform. Okay, so let's go towards this application so that it will be very practical, very simple, so that you will understand how it is done. So students, if you observe the financial drawbacks of the cloud gaming platform, it's only money drawbacks. So investment breakdown is not given. I'm analyzing my points once again. The time period is 7 years without any updates. That's a good one. And then rationale behind the discount rate is not given. And in the first year, there is a 1 million loss. The reason we have to understand, the payback period is on the 7th year and the IRR is very low. So I'll just write it down so that it will be very easy for you all. The investment breakdown has not been provided, for this project. Keep that in mind. Therefore, the business needs to consider on how they can ensure that a investment can be made. For instance, now I am going for the application. We can request for a business case. This is a source document, students, with regards to the needs of the investments. That is one factor. Keep that in mind. It's not so complicated factor, students. It's a basic factor you have to keep in mind. And the next thing, students, just to be precise, that is the next thing. In the first year, there is a loss. There is a loss of how much, students? 1 million. But there is no proper explanation. With regards to the loss, with regards to the negative cash flow, with regards to the what, students? Negative cash flow. I believe this is very, very, very clear for the students at the moment with regards to the negative cash flow. And then, students, just to make the life even easier and clearer to understand, I'll just make it even practical. Since the gaming platforms have a lower risk compared to OTT, why there is a loss? That is, again, I am emphasizing on that. Also, the project is for 7 years. But what about system maintenance? Any updates as well. So that is again one factor that we have to consider. Very, very open transformation factors, that is important. And then, students, if I'm not mistaken, I have to also say the next one, the discount rate. The discount rate is 9%. Where is the rationale for the derivation, such as the cost of capital for funding, and also there will be another situation where the business needs to ensure that any risk adjustments, since this is diversified from the cloud service business. Now see, students, I am writing answers instead of just giving the observation. I am giving a rationale for each of the answer for the moment, just for your idea perspective. And then, students, just to give you the next glimpse so that it will be very clear. So I'll just write down here the payback period. Is generally 7 years or 7th year. It is 7th year. So I'll just mention 7th year, which is very long and high risk as well, because there are high level of disruption in this sector. So just keep that in mind. It is very, 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 very important. Therefore, in that case, this will generally make sure that you have to get a better understanding of some other methods to improve the cash flow, because this is not sufficient to improve the cash flow. And then students, I'll write down finally, the IRR is very low. Therefore, this is a bigger challenge, since in Farland, if there is some macro factors, affecting the business, it may be like an interest rate change. The project may generate a negative NPV. So just keep that in mind for your understanding. So students, this is the financial drawbacks of the cloud computing game platform for your idea. Now, the next thing, students, non-financial consideration. Sorry, I need to write down the financial drawbacks. Now, see, this question is long. Actually, this question is long for OTT platform. OTT platform. This is just a practice. It gives you a lot of thinking, application, time management as well. So OTT platform, if you observe the financial drawback. So I'll write down here 20 million breakdown, not given, 7 years, long period. There are nothing updates. OTT, there may be high risk, because students, if you see the scripts, everything has a huge issue. Piracy risk is there, students. People downloading your OTT films and sharing, that I can put it here. So can I write down that piracy risk? So I'll just write down here piracy risk, students. People downloading your things, piracy risk is also there, if I'm not mistaken. Just keep that in mind, students. That is one factor to be considered at the end of the time. So the next thing is high investment fund, and year one no return. That's the issue. So I'll just write down here, the investment needs higher investment funds. Higher investment funds. Correct, no, students, if I'm not mistaken. However, the breakdown for the investment is not provided. Therefore, the shareholders, or I can say the institutional investors may raise questions with regards to the investment breakdown. Now, students, you may ask a question, 30% is the main shareholder. So can the institutional investors ask question? Yes, in case the business is underperforming, they can ask the question. They can form their union, and they can effectively make sure a new management comes into the perspective. So keep that in mind. Further, the project is for a period of 7 years. And the biggest challenge associated can be there can be disruptions as well in this period. So the cash flows may get affected. That is one more factor to be considered, students. So that is one factor in the non-financial drawbacks. And then, students, if I am not mistaken, the next thing is, students, in the year one, there is zero balance in the cash flow. How is it possible? since there can be fixed cost as well. Therefore, this is a factor to be considered. Keep that in mind, students. Finally, the investment just going above, just to see, the investment may have higher risk since the amount to be invested is very much high. Keep that in mind, students. That is very, very important. So any questions here, you just make sure that you are fine. Now, if you see, students, this is the structure. So you have scored marks, but for your marks will be scored based on the rationalizing only. Okay, so just remember that is important. Okay, such as labor and wages, just for your idea. Okay, now students, what I will do is I will effectively go to my next part, that is assess non-financial consideration. So I am going to write down here so that it will be very easy for you all. Assessment of non-financial consideration for assessment of non-financial consideration for, in simple language, cloud gaming platform. Cloud gaming platform. Cloud gaming, what students? Platform. For your understanding purpose only. Assessment of non-financial consideration for cloud gaming platform. I believe this is very, very clear for you all at the moment. Nothing to worry at the moment. So students, if you observe, the first thing, just for your idea, advertisement revenue. So the type of advertisement revenue is not mentioned. Do we have the technical feasibility? Because there is no assurance with regards to the programmers, and the ownership of the game, who owns it is one factor, and then competitive actions and cyber risk. So I'll write down here practically. The cloud gaming platform advertisement revenue is not having a proper policy. For instance, how are we going to create advertisement revenue? How are we going to create advertisement revenue? So that is one factor now, students, if I'm not mistaken. Just keep that in mind. For instance, can there be any offensive advertisements? Can there be any offensive advertisements? So that is one factor in that case. So I'll just make sure. And also, how are we going to advertise? How are we going to advertise? For whom? The users or the developers? Because that is again another question to be asked. The next factor is the ownership of the game. The ownership of the game belongs to whom? Whether NcTech, or the game developer. In case if the game developer wants to develop the same game in a different platform, can that be possible? This is a practical factor to be considered. Is there any patent rights to be considered? Keep that in mind, students, because that is very, very practical, very, very relevant also. Now, the next thing, students, just to make sure your thinking pattern is corrected and to the situation, that is ownership factor that we were explaining. And then, students, the technical feasibility and the assurance. I'll just write down here. Currently, do we possess the technical feasibility? Come on. Is there any game specialist? And if we are hiring them, what were the base for the assurance? Because that is very, very important, right? Therefore, sufficient information is needed. So keep that in mind, students. Sufficient information is needed. Now, students, just moving above. So I'll just want to say the next thing is, what about the competitor's action? Since this is a boundaryless organization, anyone can enter. Can this affect the 7 years business plan? That is a good question, if I'm not mistaken. Also, cyber risk factors are essential. Since there can be situation of ransomware, of what, students? Of ransomware. So keep that in mind, students. This is very, 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 very important at the end of the period. So I believe that you have understood these process techniques properly. So this is what you have to keep this in mind in order to do well in the examination. So I believe it is practical, it is very clear, and it is also common for you all. Now, students, the next thing what I have to do is the non-financial consideration for the OTT platform. So I'll just write down the another heading as non-financial factors, non-financial factors, non-financial factors for OTT platform, for OTT platform. Students, I'll work out with that so that it will be easy for you all as well. So if you go through the non-financial factor, what about the script quality, directors and actors? So I'll write down here. For a short film to be successful, there needs to be a good script quality. There needs to be good film actors. And music. Do we have the network? And are the artists willing to work? Do we have a sustainable remuneration package for them? That is a question mark we have to raise at the moment, students. That is practical, no, students. Therefore, in this case, we have to be more practical as well. So keep that factor in mind. Now, the next thing, students, I wanted to say the piracy risk. So I'll just write down here. there are chances the piracy risk can be high, where the films can be downloaded and shared as well. Therefore, in that case, will that be a bigger challenge affecting the revenue and cash flows? Therefore, in that case, there needs to be some plan on encryption to be considered. Students, that is one important factor you have to keep in mind. And then students, quickly moving upwards for your understanding. Now, the thing is, students, if you see the next one, if I'm not mistaken, the assurance factor is one thing you have to understand. So, a next thing, if I'm not mistaken, I just want to update, that is the project period is 14 months, but there is no sufficient time breakdown structure. With regards to why there is so time delay. Students, I believe that is very, very practical and clear for you. This can be one factor to be considered. So students, keep that in mind. This can be one factor to be considered since it is a long duration. It's a long duration, and there are chances better platforms can rise, better platform can emerge, threat of new entrant. So I believe this gives you even a better understanding on how these things work, so nothing to worry with regards to that. And then students, if I'm not mistaken, competitors action, so I'll write down here, there are chances of competitor actions to be considered as well. In that case, we have to ensure that we are having some differentiation as well, with regards to the contents, we produce. Also, the biggest challenge is sometimes if the short films doesn't go well, how are we going to recover the loss? Therefore, these are the main challenges. Students, I believe this is very, very practical, very, very clear for you all at the moment. Now, financial is done, non-financial factors to be considered is also done. Now, I'm going to write down here recommendation. Students, if you see generally recommendation, you can say what and why, but a suggested approach can be what little bit of action plan, how it can be done, and then you can complete it as well. So students, as per my discussion in this case, it is very, very transparent and very, very clear that it's not to accept this proposal. So just remember that. Considering the factors in this case, we can understand that the business needs to ensure there is a better plan for the NcTech overall business. Since currently the IaaS service is getting obsolete, it can be developed to a space since we need to sustain the existing customers. The existing customers. Make sense now, students, if I'm not mistaken. But if the company still wants to diversify, they can go for gaming platform since the investment is less. Therefore, the learning experience may not be a loss. But the OTT platform is high risky. That is one thing. And I can say finally, not to invest in either project will be a better suggestion. Full stop. So students, this is the entire answer for the mock 1 part B, question 1 part B. Technically, they may ask you an appraisal question. You have to be very much clear with the why. Don't just write the observation. Everything should have a why element in the worst case scenario. So I believe this is very, very clear for you all at the moment, students. Thank you very much. I will do the other videos for the other parts. Take care, students.